I'll go over common attachment styles. So I mentioned earlier that early in life is where we form our main attachment styles. And it's important to know that there is no such thing as a wrong attachment style, that there's just variation and diversity in humans, which is helpful because everyone's grown up in different contexts and environments. And each attachment style will have certain strengths and also some challenges that come with it. And it can be helpful just to know which one you might lean towards or which couple you lean towards, because then you can know your strengths and your superpowers, maybe know some areas to gain some skills. Anxious attachment. So this is where someone might have a high sensitivity to emotions and changes in relationships with high accuracy. So there's that superpower there to be able to notice when something changes. Maybe someone has usually kind of gone on dates and been quite chatty, and suddenly they're maybe not as chatty or showing as much expression in their face on the next date. And someone with anxious attachment might be able to pick that up really quickly. The challenge with anxious attachment style is there's more activation in the emotion center of the brain, the amygdala, which is like the fire alarm, which sets off a fight, flight, or freeze response, our survival responses if there's a danger. And if there's more overactivation of the amygdala, it means that when there's a change in the dynamic, you can be more likely to over-personalize what's going on, jump to worst-case conclusions. So, for example, if someone's not as chatty when you next see them, the mind might straight away jump to they want to break up, or I've done something wrong. It might be harder to imagine they've had a tough day at work, or it's maybe something, you know, in our connection, they're annoyed, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a deal breaker. People who relate to anxious attachment, their nervous system feels most comfortable when there's closeness with someone, so physical or lots of consistent kind of messages or calls. And anxiety flares up if there's too much distance with someone. So if we haven't heard from them in a while, haven't gone on a date, you know, in a week, then anxiety can flare up. And the nervous system gets settled again when there's more closeness. Someone with anxious attachment can be really great at knowing other people's needs and attuning to them, but can sometimes do it at the expense of neglecting their own. So some common dynamics people with anxious attachment might fall into is they might be prone to attaching to someone who's a 40% person, or someone who breadcrumbs, or love bombing types. Then we've got avoidant attachment style. So this is where someone's nervous system feels most calm when there's a good amount of independence and sense that they've got their own individual life. And stress flares up for them, the opposite to anxious attachment style, if there's too much closeness or perceived closeness. They'll feel more stressed and want a bit more space again. So someone with avoidant attachment style, their superpower is to be able to have that independence, which is really healthy for a long-term relationship and necessary. The downside is that they sometimes might be doing distancing behaviors, like, you know, suddenly not replying to someone for hours, or, you know, canceling a date suddenly, which can then maybe disrupt a connection and maybe can make it harder to form that long-term relationship. Sometimes people with avoidant attachment style might find themselves falling into situationships, or maybe find themselves love bombing someone because it feels like they're really interested in someone, but then their nervous system feels stressed when there's suddenly too much closeness and they suddenly pull away. Disorganized attachment style. So this is where people might find themselves, I guess, yo-yoing between that wanting to attach to someone and then wanting more space. That at different times, closeness or distance can trigger stress. The superpower of this attachment style is someone can be really adaptable to different types of dating dynamics and people. And they can also have those strengths in knowing how to focus on independence or focus on the relationship. And it's just about having the skills to marry those two up, to have both, coexistent at the same time. Someone with disorganized attachment might be prone to find themselves feeling like they're in a roller coaster in relationships, that it can feel like, really exciting and then really stressful and go back and forth. And then we've got secure attachment. This is the last one I'll talk about. So this is where someone feels like they have that balance between feeling safe when there's closeness with someone and when they have their independence. It's generally easier to assert yourself when you're feeling secure, and to speak up about your needs, to say no to an unwanted request. And also there's less activation of that amygdala, that threat detector of the brain. So someone might find it easier to assume the best case in a scenario, which makes it easier to talk to someone about something difficult. And people might find that there might be some relationships like friendships or certain family members where they feel secure. And then there might be other types of relationships like romantic, where they relate to more anxious or avoidant or disorganized. Secure attachment, people can be prone to going into long-term committed relationships. This can mean that in the dating pool, there might not be as many people with secure attachment in the dating pool at one time, which means that there could be more people with anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. And generally, people who are anxious and anxious don't tend to pair or avoidant. So that's where you get that common dynamic, if you've ever heard of the anxious avoidant trap. So this is where two people might, really like each other, be getting along in dating, but one person has anxious attachment style and they might be kind of texting or wanting to get more commitment from the other person. And the other person might have avoidant attachment style, and the more that person approaches them, the more they feel stressed and they pull away. Unfortunately, that then triggers the other person's nervous system and they're both triggering each other. Now, you can definitely have a healthy relationship if people are on the opposite spectrums of attachment styles, but it's about having that awareness and having skills to communicate and navigate those triggers. I'm going to show you a little video now, which I'll tell you afterwards how I can see how it can relate to dating and different attachment styles. Okay, so in that video, you saw the little chick at first being really, really distressed and chasing after the human. It was, if you could hear the noise it was making, these really high-pitched chirping noises. It was feeling frantic and rushed and trying to get, closeness with that human who was walking away. then when the human was attending to their needs and the needs were being met, so they were getting a bath, they were getting, you know, hair dry on them, getting nice and warm, then the chick was feeling really calm. It wasn't kind of chirping as much or kind of being rushed in its actions, that it was feeling more settled. And this can happen in dating as well. So if we're in dating situations where someone isn't meeting our needs, the nervous system is going to flare up more. And you're going to have more symptoms, whether it's dating anxiety, dating burnout, anger, intense emotions. And when we're looking at helping form long-term, you know, relationships or what someone's looking for in dating, we want to be able to have the skills to filter people who are not meeting our needs, and also the skills to be able to speak up to more easily get our needs met in relationships from other people. And then knowing that symptoms settle down when this happens. Because often people can have a lot of shame or self-blame if they have lots of anxiety or things like that. And it's really important to remember that it's also the context that can be flaring these things up. So with attachment styles, it's really helpful to, one, get a bit more awareness about these and know what your superpowers are. And then you can utilize your strengths and also build a bit of a toolbox for the challenges that you might be facing. I've got a bit of a warning here that if your nervous system is used to a certain type of relationship, so maybe you're used to being with someone who's a breadcrumber or 40% person, where you only get a few of your needs met, and then you feel really anxious when they're not replying or they're kind of ghosting you, and then suddenly they reappear and we feel this relief and excitement. Your nervous system might be used to this overstimulation, this yo-yo of feeling anxious, low mood, and then feeling relief and excitement and hope. And when this is happening, we can get used to that highs and lows, those extremes. And when you meet someone who maybe is a 90%, 100% person who is actually secure, who's willing to show up and be consistent, often we might undervalue those people, someone with more secure attachment, because the nervous system's not used to it. And at first it just feels like things are boring, or there's no spark, or I just don't know why, but I'm just not really feeling it. I know they tick all the boxes. That's really common things I've heard people say. And it's really important to remember that the nervous system can learn to come out of this overstimulation response and to connect with someone who's more stable, and then start to feel more joy and excitement in those relationships, but it can take some time. And so there's a rule that going into dating, we don't want to make impulsive decisions, you know, absolutely no with this person, if we're unsure and feeling like we just need to prematurely make a decision. So if it's maybe, I'm not sure, then keep going until it's a definite yes or no.